Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Real Raw and Honest. So, today we're going to be talking about boundaries. I just had a conversation with someone not long ago, a few conversations actually, about some things that had gone on and how powerless they felt in the moment and what could they do differently in it. And so, today I'm going to be taking a look at this very important topic. See, the thing about boundaries is we, and especially as believers, we don't want to put anything in place that's going to cause us to look bad or to look like we're harsh or that we want things to go a specific way because we don't want to be looking like we're controlling or manipulative or difficult or unloving or unkind or any of those things. But the problem is, especially when you have a family, is that people figure out how to get you to do what they want you to do. And that means that oftentimes that looks like manipulation. Very often it looks like control. Very often it can look like things that are being said that cut you deeply, that silence you, that make you compliant so that you're not ashamed or embarrassed because family knows you. And so that's what I want to just kind of talk about why that's one of the reasons why we need to have boundaries in place. So, you know, almost everybody who comes out of a chaotic or traumatic childhood has difficulty with boundaries. Boundaries are just one of those things that's hard to establish. I've led a couple of groups on boundaries in the past. And I've sat in with other people who have led those boundaries. And so that boundaries course. And so maybe it's something I'll look at doing in the future because it is a very important thing. Because when you're wounded and you've come out of that place where you don't feel like you have the right to defend yourself or stand up for yourself or to put restrictions around your children with your parents or your husband's parents, you end up in this conflict of hating what's going on but not knowing how to fix it without causing or being made to look like you're the problem. So it's not uncommon. Lots of people struggle with boundaries, and there are some ways that you can put up a boundary nicely, kindly, gently, but firmly, and to be able to say, this is what we're doing. This is what I want. If you don't comply with this, this is what's going to happen. And doing it in such a way that you don't that it can be received. I'm not going to guarantee it's going to be received. I'll tell you that. People don't like to have boundaries placed around them, especially if what they're doing is for their own benefit. So let's continue. So boundaries are, if you consider boundaries not as a shutting out, not as a stopping a relationship from moving forward, not from causing any of those things to have not as a control issue, but if you see boundaries as a way to protect relationship, a way to protect innocence, a way to protect your children or your aged parents, and if you look at that, because sometimes we have no problem putting up a boundary with the doctor, with the nurse, with a healthcare aide. I just remembered I did not put my phone on Do Not Disturb, so bear with me for 2 seconds while I actually do that because I do not want my phone to ring while we are in the middle of this. Okay, so that is done. Okay, so sometimes we have no problem setting a boundary with some people, but with other people, it's next to impossible. Maybe it's very difficult for you to put a boundary up again with your mom or with your dad or with your husband or boyfriend or whatever. Like sometimes it's easy to put up that boundary with a coworker. So let's look at some of this and go, what is the boundary for? The boundary is actually there to manage, to help manage and help create healthy space inside the relationship. So it will establish where you put the boundary helps you to establish how close are you. So the relationship that you have, the boundary that you're going to have with your husband will be and should be different than the people that you have at work. It's going to be determined by things like how emotionally healthy are the people involved in the relationship. It's going to affect things like and having to look at how does our relationship actually work. how do we work together? Are we good together? Are we not good together? Do we fight a lot? Is there a lot of you know what's the word I'm looking for? Is there a lot of disdain toward the other person? Like, what does that relationship look like? So it's establishing, what does our love look like? What does our relationship look like? And I'm going to tell you this. Like, so in order to do that, we need to know, what does a healthy relationship look like? What is that? What does it look like? What does it sound like? Well, a healthy relationship, first of all, needs to be established, so that you can know what it is you're looking at and what you're not looking at. You need to determine, the other thing you need to determine is, first of all, is the relationship healthy? Second of all, what am I responsible for in this relationship? So that's a big part. What am I responsible for? What are they responsible for? As an adult, as a married adult female, as a married adult male, your relationship now becomes the primary part. You are no longer, your relationship with your parents shift, and you now are your own separate family. So your responsibility toward your parents shifts. I was first married, the first time, my husband would often get a phone call to continue doing things for members of his family that he had done while he was living at home. Things like mowing the lawn, shoveling the driveway, those kinds of things. And that was no longer appropriate because, you know what? Those people, the relationship had changed. I had become his family. The relationship and the responsibility in that first relationship had shifted. Now the responsibility is him to me, me to him, primarily. And so determining those things is important. And then we have to look at, what does love actually look like? What does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that feel like in a relationship, so that the boundaries that you put up protect that? Well, a healthy, loving relationship looks like being honest with one another. It means not being honest to the point to harm somebody. I've been around people who are, and I didn't think this was healthy, but honesty was definitely there. But I just want you to know that while I was out today, I found myself flirting with this woman that was across that was there, and that's hurtful. First of all, that's not okay. So determining honesty, right? If you're struggling, if you have a struggle in that area, you need to work on that. You need to deal with it. So honesty is a part of a healthy, loving relationship. That means there's no lying when it comes into relationship. That means that if I've gone to the store and I spent $100 extra on a gift or groceries or whatever, I'm going to be honest about that. It means that if I'm having a difficult day and I'm angry with you, I'm going to be honest about, I am angry with you and this is why I'm angry with you, and not to say, nope, I'm fine, and go into that passive aggressive anger that slams things around and gives the silent treatment. That is not a healthy relationship. If you're married, a healthy, loving relationship means there's no cheating. And that should go without saying. It also means that there's no physical, no emotional, and no verbal violence in the home. That means I'm not going to tell you I think you're stupid, or what. I'm not going to say those things. I'm not going to go, oh my gosh, how could you be so dumb like that? I'm not going to berate you. It's a healthy relationship. Okay, I might see that differently than you see it, and here's how I see it, and this is why I see it that way. I'm going to, and I disagree with you on the way that you're looking at this. It's a healthy relationship to be able to go, I think you're actually causing harm in this relationship, or maybe you need to work on some inner healing about that particular thing right there. Boundaries, what do they look like? What does a healthy relationship look like? Now, if you want to go into that healthy relationship, putting up boundaries is a great way to do it, and having these honest conversations so that there are no hidden parts. Okay. Another thing we need to do is we need to determine how responsible we are for the other person. Not responsible to the other person, but how responsible am I for the other person. As a parent, you're quite responsible for your children, especially depending on how old they are. If you have an under 5, you're very responsible for that human being. If you have children between the ages of 10 and 14, you're still very responsible for them, but you're starting to give them more freedom. If you're married, are you responsible for the actions and the attitudes and the thought processes of your spouse? No, you're not actually responsible for those things. They are an autonomous human being. They have a right to their own thought process. They can do what they want, think what they want, act how they want, say what they want. You don't have to like it, but you are not responsible for them. And I've been told in some of the things that I've relationships, working relationships, that you have to protect me. You have to make, your job is to make me look good. No, I am not responsible for how other people see you. That doesn't mean I'm going to go around and I'm going to tell people awful things about you. What it means is you determine how other people see you. I don't actually have the ability to do that. Now, if I'm gossiping about you, that's one thing. But if you're doing something wrong, I don't have to try to make that right. I'm not responsible for that. That's not my responsibility. So other ways that this might look is, do you allow yourself to be manipulated for the sake of that other person's betterment, right? Are you allowing yourself to look and go, if my husband's an alcoholic, we'll use that one because this is something that I've seen happen multiple times, that he goes out, he gets drunk, it's a Tuesday night, he's drunk, he's hungover, and you call in and you say, my husband is sick, when he's not sick, and he doesn't act, he's hungover. Like, that's the truth. So there's that aspect of it. So are you allowing yourself to be manipulated? And the manipulation is, if I don't lie for him, and if I tell his boss that he's actually hungover, he will lose his job. Therefore, we will maybe lose the house. He will have to be looking for another job. It might spiral him more into alcoholism. I might need to go get a job. I might need to, so that's the manipulation. Are you allowing yourself to be manipulated in this situation? So determining how responsible you are for the other person means, when do you say no? When do you say, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to put up a healthy boundary here. I'm not doing this. I'm saying no. What does that look like? And how to say no. And this goes a lot in parental relationships, child and parents, right? You're in an environment where your parents are doing specific things that you don't want your children to be a part of. And you have to say, I'm going to put my boundary up here because I don't want them to be a part of this. So knowing when to say no and how to say no, and what that boundary is going to look like, and be very firm with that, but very loving with that. How does that look? And then what does your privacy look like? Even as a married person, you should have some privacy when you're both together. You should have the ability to go and just, for me, it would be, going to spend an hour in prayer, or to go read a book, or you have privacy when I do my one-on-one meetings, or if I do a group. Anything that is said, anything that is done, anything that is communicated is absolutely confidential. Nobody hears about it. My husband does not know the things that are talked about. So there's that. What does my privacy look like? My privacy when we're together is that we're completely open and honest. But if I've had a conversation with anybody in any kind of a counseling role, it's 100% confidential. Privacy matters. And so the question might be, what do you want that to look like? I remember when I first got married the first time, it was like all of a sudden you're in the washroom, and all of a sudden my spouse would just open the door and walk in, and I'd be like, what are you doing? Like, this is not a public event. I get to actually do this on my own. If I want to have some quiet time while I'm in the tub, you don't get to come in. If I'm going to the washroom, you just don't get to come in. You wait till I'm done. So putting up those boundaries and going, what does that look like? Okay, so let's move on. The thing is we learn our boundaries as children because either our boundaries and our voice was heard or it was not heard. And if either our boundaries were encouraged or they were not encouraged. When I get something as a gift, when I go to the store, that belongs to me. My younger siblings cannot touch it, cannot have it, cannot read it, cannot whatever. It is mine. If my door is closed and I'm in it, you knock before you enter. Those boundaries should be encouraged, and they should apply to the children as well, to the siblings as well as to the parents. However, maybe you lived in a home where boundaries were not accepted, or maybe there were no boundaries. Everything went. People could go into other people's rooms and they could rifle through their drawers. They could borrow a t-shirt or a shirt without asking. Maybe there was just this everybody lives in this house and everything belongs to everybody kind of event. Well, that sets you up then as an adult to be able to struggle with boundaries because you've never had them, or you put them up and they were never heeded. So bear in mind, there might be some people you need to forgive, and knowing that you do have the right to have a boundary, you do have a right to have some privacy, and you do have a right to protect your relationships and your own mental well-being. Okay? So there are good and healthy boundaries, and there are unhealthy boundaries. I want to say that as well. Thing is, we need to have boundaries so that we feel secure, and as children, they actually help us to feel safe, but as adults, they help us to feel safe as well. Boundaries help us to feel secure. I feel safe. I feel like I can, I'm feeling angry, or my spouse is feeling angry. I feel safe if I get to have the opportunity to remove myself from that situation so that I can calm down or he can calm down. That's a boundary that says, if you're going to begin to yell or slam things, that makes me uncomfortable, so I'm going to do this. It's a boundary. Should make you feel safe, should make you feel secure. Thing is, boundaries can be relaxed or they can be very rigid. Relaxed boundaries, rigid boundaries. Relaxed, I'll give you an example. A relaxed boundary will say, you're in high school, you need to be home by 4:30 and every day of the week, and that because I am at work and that makes me know that you are safe. So you have to be home by 4:30. How you get there, whether you take a ride from your boyfriend or a girlfriend who has a driver's license, or whether you take the bus, that's entirely up to you, but you have to be home by 4:30. That's a boundary with very clear expectations. What's not negotiable is being home at 4:30. How you get there is entirely up to you. Here's another one. This is a rigid boundary. Here's how this works. You have to be home by 4:30. You have to take the bus. Do not miss the bus. If you have practice of any kind, so don't engage in any extracurricular activities. Here's the boundary. You're home at 4:30. You're taking the bus. It doesn't matter whether your father shows up at the school. You're taking the bus if you're divorced or whatever. And so those are boundaries that are rigid boundaries. It has to look like this. Now, in a relationship that you value, you don't want to put up those kinds of boundaries, except for cheating, right? It's unacceptable. If you cheat, here's what's going to happen. It's a non-negotiable, right? You just don't cheat. You don't flirt. I don't think that flirting, as a believer, I don't think that that should fly ever. I don't think it's okay. I think if you're married, you don't flirt with anybody. You don't you save that relationship. You don't flirt with somebody. I think that that's also a non-negotiable. And I do know people that are married who say, I am a flirt. That is wrong. You need to work on that. So I would say religion puts up very strict boundaries, very rigid boundaries. Things like Catholicism has some very strong, strict boundaries. Jehovah's Witnesses, I could just go on. Orthodox Jewish people, people that are Muslim, very strict rules around how they act, how they respond, what they do, what they can't do, how they dress, how they can't dress. The Amish, the Hutterites, all of those things, great examples of all of that, right? So the thing is the best place to start with the boundary is to make the boundary out of love. You want to make the boundary so that it's a protection for everybody, and so that it's what's best for all the parties involved. That's the big thing about a boundary. The boundary should never be to benefit one person. If the boundary is to benefit one person, then it's an unhealthy boundary. It should benefit everybody. And especially with children, if you have children, the boundary that you're placing with grandparents is to benefit mostly the children, but it also benefits the grandparents in different ways, right? So you have to determine, I don't want my child to be a part of this, therefore this is my boundary. If you cross it, we won't be coming over on events like this. If you don't cross it, we get to spend lots of time. So benefiting everybody. And also, a boundary shouldn't really be restrictive if in a healthy relationship, and it shouldn't be negative, and it shouldn't feel unsafe. So, a boundary, like I've just given a few examples there, so understanding all of those things. And if you have any questions, you can always get a hold of me. We can have a conversation about boundaries. So, again, when a person grows up in this chaotic home, in this traumatic home where there's lots of things, we talked about the fishbowl of stress. When you grow up in an environment that's angry, and there's infighting, and there's yelling, and there's violence and emotional damage that's going on, when you grow up in that kind of home, the children, most often, I could not put up boundaries. If I was doing homework and somebody was upset with me, mom or dad, they could just barge into my room and just have at it. And that would be how that would work. And that's not, so my boundary of, I'm doing homework, my door is closed, don't enter unless you knock, because you don't know what I might be studying, I might be whatever, that didn't work. So boundaries that are placed on the children did not make them feel safe, but often made things worse and made them feel very vulnerable. And that is especially in the situation of violence, of abuses of any kind, including SA, including, physical abuse. Those kinds of things makes the child then become like a pawn to the person who set up the boundary. So we don't want to go there. That's an unhealthy boundary. So let's determine this, and then we're going to be done for today. And I know I've given you a lot of information already, so listen to it a couple times. Share this video with other people, because this is something that people struggle with on a daily basis. And some people have gone their whole life and they just say yes to everything because they've learned that people pleasing is the safest way for them to go. So if I say no, I might get injured. So if I want to be received, if I want to be liked, if I want to be accepted, if I want to be included, the best thing I could do is just go along with it. And so that just sets that person up for all kinds of hurt and pain, and just a life of absolute busyness that they can barely manage. We're not going to go into much more than that today, but just know that if you are somebody who always says yes to everything, you need to start to establish some boundaries. There is a word that people who say yes all the time don't know how to say very well, and that's the word no. Pretty small word holds very big implications. So learn some boundaries, get some healing, listen to these videos, share them, subscribe, leave a comment. These are things that are if you want to help me, and if you want to help yourself or other people, please do this. You never know who's going to pick it up and listen to it and think, wow, this is good content. And so let's ask this. Where do you need to put up a boundary? You need to put up a boundary if someone is being manipulative with you. And that can look like words of manipulation, but it can also be actions of manipulation. It can be, I heard you tell me you don't want me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's what I want to do. And you're not going to be able to do anything about it. You're manipulated into silence because of who that individual is. This is very often what can take place in a work environment with somebody who's higher, like a boss and an employee. So you need to put up a boundary if you feel like you are being used. Are you being used? Is your wisdom being used? For years, and because I have this prophetic, very strong prophetic, people would ask me all the time, I just don't share a lot of it, but people would ask me all the time, what's God saying? And I can't count the amount of times this has happened. What's God saying to you? And I would say, well, God is saying this, and God is saying this, and God is saying this. And and a couple of times, almost immediately as the words came out of my mouth, that other individual would get up and go to the front of the church and go, I just got a word from the Lord. And it would be what God had just told me. Are you being used? So if they're pumping you for information to make themselves look good, you need to put up a boundary. And that has happened to me countless times through the years. Now I don't allow that to happen. I just go, he's telling me a lot of things. Why do you want to know? Right? Are you wanting to know so that you can pray about it? Because absolutely. But if you're going to get up there and say that this is the word of the Lord for you, then I'm not okay with that. Right? So you get to know who those people are in your world, and you have to put up a boundary. Thing is, you put up a boundary again. Why do you do it? So you feel safe, so that you are safe, so that your children are safe, so that your marriage is safe, so that the relationship that you are cultivating or that you have had long term is safe. You put up a boundary for safety. Years ago, I knew this young gal who I would say to her, and she had come from a home that was challenging, to say the least. And I asked her, we talked about boundaries because there was far too much sharing that was going on of things that this young gal did not need to know. And I would say, why are you putting up, you need to put up a boundary? So we talked about it, and I go, why are you? She honestly believed that the reason she had to put up boundaries was to protect other people from her. She never did get past the fact that, no, you actually put up a boundary because it's protecting you, right? Are you that wicked, violent individual that you need to put up a boundary so that other people don't get hurt by the things you say or do? But that is the environment she had grown up in. Everything was her fault, right? And so that did not go well, and unfortunately we weren't able to make a whole lot of progress in that. So we establish a boundary so that we and the things that we love, the people that we love, our marriage, our children, that they are safe. So for an example, we have to say, I'm not going to put up with verbal put downs. You cannot tell me I'm stupid. You cannot tell me that I look fat in that dress. There's other ways of saying it. It's how you say it. Maybe this other dress would be a better option today. There's ways of saying it in a way that don't bring pain and shame. So anger eruptions, if the anger eruptions are damaging emotionally, if the anger is coming forward in a way to control or manipulate, which it often can, because if I'm angry, you're going to sit, you're going to listen, you're going to do what I want, so you don't have to experience this anymore. You put up a boundary that says, no, actually, I don't need to be your verbal punching bag. Here's my boundary. And also lies. I will not, that is the one thing for me. Don't lie to me, because if you lie to me, that's a struggle for me. Then the boundaries immediately begin to come up. So how do we establish these boundaries? So thing is, in order to establish a boundary in a way that is beneficial for everybody that's involved, first of all, you need to know that I care about you. You need to know that I love you and I value our relationship. I value your input as my parents. I value your being here, my relationship with you as my husband, that I value you in these ways. I care about our relationship. But when you do this thing, when you take away my power, when you take away my ability to think for myself, when you put things in the way that stop me from rising up and being all that God called me to be, and when you say unkind things, those things hurt me and then they cause damage to me. So now I'm putting up a boundary so that I can grow and I can heal and we can have a healthier, better relationship. It's establishing the why I'm doing it. And you get married, you do it the first time, you do it the second time, however many times. I now have a second husband. We've had to put boundaries up in different ways, right? So I will work in the evening Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but I do not work in the evening on Monday and Friday because he wants my weekend. He wants me to be present and available, and that's fine. That's a boundary. We're okay with that. Okay, another thing. So you can say something like this: I'm establishing my boundary because if you or when you do X, Y, and Z from now on, I will let you know that you are doing it in case you are unaware. So that means I hear you getting angry, you just slammed your cup on the table, or you're in the kitchen and you're slamming things around because you're angry, but you are giving me the silent treatment and you don't want to talk to me. You're putting forward these things that are causing me to feel unsafe, and I know you're upset, but you won't tell me what. I'm putting up a boundary when you do this. And because we've had this conversation, I will let you know you're giving me the silent treatment and you're being passive aggressive and I'm feeling unsafe, just in case you're unaware that you're doing it. So then you'll say something like, if you continue to do this, I'm going to remove myself from the room. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go out and get some coffees. I'm going to do whatever it is your boundary is. I'm going to leave the house for a while because I'm not feeling safe. So if you continue to do this from now on, this is what's going to happen. If you don't stop, I'm going to remove myself. I'm going to go on a walk. I'm not going to respond. If you're yelling at me and you're being verbally unkind, I'm not responding. I'm not going to sit there and take it either, but I'm not going to fight with you. And you could just say that I'm not going to fight with you. And you just keep saying that I will not fight with you. I'm going to go for a walk now because I will not fight with you. So if you're on the phone with somebody and that's what's happening, you can go, if you continue this, I'm going to hang up the phone. And then you hang up the phone. So these are boundaries, right? And then, so I'm going to give you one tool today because this is a longer topic that we need to consider. So you first of all need to determine what the problem is, what is the situation that's going on, and what's the boundary going to be. So what does that look like? If you are, like I said, passive aggressive and you're going to get mad and give me the silent treatment for 3 days and I'm supposed to figure out what it is you're upset about, that's why we need to put a boundary in place. And now what's the boundary going to be? How am I going to handle that? And that's the first thing. And then always work on the forgiveness. Forgive them so that you don't respond in anger when you are either establishing the boundary or when you are putting the boundary in place in that moment. So you're going, okay, I've established the boundary. We've had the conversation when things were good, when things were calm. This makes me feel unsafe when you get angry and you slam things. And I know you're angry and you won't talk to me. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to, we've had the conversation. So now that you're doing it, I'm going to apply the boundary, right? So, but you don't want to apply the boundary in angry because that just escalates things in and of itself. So make sure you're calm, but putting that boundary in place will help you to do that. So that's it for today. I hope you found that helpful. I hope you found that it was beneficial. Please be encouraged. Like I said, please share, please subscribe, please let other people know about the content that I'm putting out here. I've been doing this for so long. I've been doing it for over 25 years now. And so, I'd love to see people get free. I'd love to see people get healthy. Be encouraged. God is with you. Be blessed, be real, be raw, be honest, and allow God to bring the healing into your heart so that you can be all that He's created for you to be, and let Him love other people through you. And I thank you for it. Amen.